Elara Silvers awoke as the first rays of dawn crept through the towering glass panes of her Mediterranean front penthouse. The air was silent and cool, mirroring her own temperament. Not a whisper disturbed the stillness, save for the soft rustle of linen curtains brushing the window frame, an unspoken reminder that life presses on, regardless of the quiet that lingers in every breath. She sat up and wrapped herself in a smoky gray robe. Her deep blue eyes surveyed the room's minimalist yet luxurious decor. A large abstract painting dominated one wall, a work of art only Nox Aurora, Elara's secret artistic alias, could have conceived. In the pale morning light, its brushstrokes seemed to pulse with life, yet she maintained the necessary reserve to shield her true self beneath this flawless guise. Morning routine carried her across to the sleek black laptop resting on her desk, awaiting new notifications. Today promised to be hectic. She needed to finalize preparations for her upcoming Venice exhibition, complete 4 new canvases, and simultaneously monitor the investigation into her mother Marianne Silvers' death. Marianne, a celebrated painter whose renown once spanned Europe, had died suddenly 5 years ago, leaving behind a trove of paintings accused of plagiarism and a sullied reputation, ruined by powerful conspiracies. Every time Elara flipped through the tattered family album, memories jolted her. Her mother's paint-stained hands, the bitter whispers of jealous rivals shouting, "Marianne Silvers only knows how to steal ideas." From that moment on, Elara vowed to remain anonymous, using Nox Aurora both to protect herself and to draw closer to those responsible, inch by inch, exposing the truth. A cozy kitchenette adjoined the living area, just large enough for a marble bar counter where Elara brewed a strong espresso. The aroma of coffee blended with the briny sea air to sharpen her senses, though it could not fully dispel the emptiness in her heart. Beneath the warm golden lamp, she gazed at her parents' wedding portrait, a young artist couple once blissfully in love. Her father had died in a traffic accident, leaving Marianne alone in a cutthroat art world. How many times had Elara wondered, if her mother had not fought so fiercely to protect her own artistic vision, would things have turned out differently? But now it was too late. Only she remained, driven by the mission to reclaim her mother's honor. Finishing her coffee, Elara entered her studio, a pristine white room serving as both office and atelier. 2 shelves of paint, a handful of brushes, and a dark wood easel held 4 large canvases in progress. Each stroke carried a piece of her longing and her resolve to vindicate her mother. True to her vow, she never revealed her real identity, no interviews, no media photographs. Every Nox Aurora engagement ran through her private management team. She believed that mystery was her greatest asset in uncovering the case's hidden forces. Her hand drifted over a portrait of a woman gazing up at a leaden sky, Marianne's final public appearance immortalized. Hollow eyes that seemed to flee some unseen terror, a forced smile, and a frail figure bowed by public pressure. Elara's goal was to touch viewers' hearts, to make them feel her mother's injustice. Yet she, too, wrestled with doubt. If her true name emerged, would the public still value the art, or would they dismiss it as the vanity of a rich heiress? Her cold reserve had become a shield guarding her from emotional vulnerability, but it also left her painfully alone. Now she faced a crucial next step. She needed a genuine ally with skills in evidence gathering, clue hunting, and protection from unseen threats. Just then, her laptop screen lit up with the name Dorian Black and a first email requesting collaboration. She clicked it open, reading a concise yet confident introduction. "I am a private investigator specializing in power-driven cases in the art world. If you require assistance, I am ready to listen and act." Elara's brow furrowed, his tone was polite yet decisive, exactly the partner she sought. Without hesitation, she drafted her reply, concealing any personal details and describing herself only as a client seeking clarity on the death of artist Marianne S. She proposed meeting at a tucked-away cafe in a narrow alley of Barcelona's Gothic quarter, where no one would recognize her hidden face. A strange flutter of anticipation stirred in her, curiosity about this detective, mingled with concern for her own safety. Trust was a luxury she seldom granted, but she knew that without risk, her mother's legacy would remain buried. With the email sent, Elara sat in her studio, gazing at the 4 canvases. Memories surfaced of her mother's bitterness at being forced into commercial projects. Marianne had confided how Artiscorp's power brokers threatened her, demanding she abandon her style or face a ruined reputation. Her story ended with the staccato of gunfire outside that deserted studio door. What lay ahead for Elara? Would the investigation bring justice, or only reopen old wounds? A wave of loneliness crashed over her, but she refused to stop. As dusk fell, golden light bathed Marianne's portrait. Elara set down her brush, lips pressed into a firm line. She donned her coat, grabbed a small backpack, and left the studio. Walking Barcelona's cobblestone streets, she heard distant church bells and breathed in the lingering lavender scent. It reminded her, life marches on, and she must press forward despite pain and peril. Tonight she would meet Dorian Black, and the quest for truth would truly begin. She slipped into the dim alley lined with tiny cafes, their amber lights glimmering on damp stones. Footsteps echoed, mingling with clinks of cups and cutlery. Clutching her bag's strap, she felt her pulse quicken. She told herself to stay calm, to appear confident, though her mind raced with questions about the man she was about to meet. Was Dorian Black truly an ally, or just another pawn in a deadly power game? A door creaked open, letting in a cool jasmine-scented breeze. Elara inhaled deeply and entered, choosing a table in a shadowed corner. The wooden surface was scratched and worn by time. She set her pack down, eyes flicking over the exposed brick wall, then to the window, waiting for Dorian's arrival. A faint smile curved her lips, but it was as fleeting as ripples on a still pond. Less than 5 minutes later, he appeared. Dorian Black cut an imposing figure in a pale blue shirt, sleeves neatly cuffed, brown hair impeccably groomed. His alert gaze swept the cafe before settling on Elara. He inclined his head in greeting, then approached. Silence seemed to pause, as if the world were holding its breath for this moment. He pulled out the chair opposite her and spoke in a warm, measured tone. "You must be Nox Aurora?" Elara studied him before replying, gauging the authenticity in his eyes. Finally, she nodded, "Yes. I have a matter I'd like your help with." Dorian did not press further. He placed his hand on the table and waited. In that silence, Elara felt a spark of reassurance. Sometimes, the unspoken word carries more weight than 1,000 arguments. She opened her pack and withdrew a sealed manila envelope. "These are all the documents I have on my mother, Marianne S.," she said, her eyes flickering with sadness as she tapped the embossed Black Lotus logo of Artiscorp. They forced her to paint to their specifications, then destroyed her reputation with plagiarism claims. "I want to know who orchestrated this, and how to bring the truth to light." Dorian took the envelope, nodded thoughtfully, and leafed through photocopies, crime scene photos, and smudged handwritten notes. "This won't be easy," he admitted. "But I'll start with Artiscorp, specifically, the head of their rights and licensing division. They'll have many questions to answer." A surge of new energy coursed through Elara. She thought of her mother, a strong, gifted woman who once trusted the art world, only to be betrayed. She silently vowed never to let history repeat itself. Yet beneath that resolve lay a flicker of fear. Could this first lead plunge her into danger? She knew all too well that immense power breeds ruthless reprisals. Before she could dwell further, Dorian's phone buzzed. He frowned. Elara's instincts told her this concerned her. He read a message from V. Black and looked troubled. "My wife, Vivian, has heard rumors that you're seducing me. Her sister Harlow accused you behind my back, and now Vivian wants to meet to get the facts." Elara recognized Harlow as the inquisitive sister-in-law and Vivian as the protective wife. She frowned but stifled her anger. "Could they arrive at any moment?" she asked. He nodded. "I'll make it clear to Vivian that this is strictly professional, no personal entanglements." He met her gaze with earnest eyes. "You need not worry. I'll safeguard you within the bounds of the law." His words eased her heart slightly. For the first time in years, someone truly believed in her and stood ready to face dangers by her side. They concluded with Dorian's plan. He would travel to Artiscorp's Munich headquarters next week to gather evidence, while Elara continued unveiling her new series in Barcelona to draw public attention. She agreed, though anxiety gnawed at her. If this plan exposed her, her years of anonymity could vanish. She lifted her coffee cup, its bitterness intensifying, a reminder that the path ahead would demand sacrifice and courage. Stepping back into the drizzle, Elara walked beneath streetlights that shimmered on wet stones. She pulled her collar up against the rain, protecting her glossy black hair. Under the church porch, she paused and bowed her head before a crimson relief of the crucified Christ, a symbol of death and sacrifice. Then she lifted her gaze, determination lighting her eyes. She would see this through, no matter how treacherous. She was prepared to risk everything to restore her mother's justice. A stronger sea breeze stirred salty air and wildflower scents. Elara inhaled deeply and clenched her fist. "Mother, I will not let your life be in vain," she whispered. Then she stepped forward into the night, her solitary footprints fading behind her as she moved toward the faint glow of hope. The dawn in Barcelona seemed to slowly sweep away the night, covering the silent streets in a thin veil of mist. Elara returned to her penthouse, where the white walls still bore the smudges of canvases yet to be cleaned. She sighed and headed straight to her studio. On the easel, 4 paintings were taking shape, figures hidden in shadow, their distant gazes searching for something unfinished. Every brushstroke carried her heartfelt devotion to her mother, and served as a disguise to conceal her true identity. Elara sat down, letting the early sunlight fall directly onto her brushes. She placed a brush against the canvas and studied each line once more. A torrent of emotions welled up within her, anger at the injustice her mother suffered, grief at the memory of her sudden death, and a resolute determination never to falter. She mixed her paints slowly, blending dark tones that still shimmered with a glimmer of light, a symbol of hope and the pursuit of justice. 30 minutes later, her phone rang on the desk. She looked up, startled to see Dorian Black on the screen. She'd assumed he'd already departed for Munich. "Yes," she answered. His warm voice replied at once, "I've booked my flight, I leave this afternoon. But before I go, I need to meet you. I've uncovered something new, directly linked to Artiscorp." Elara nodded even though he couldn't see her. "Where and when?" she asked. He told her to be at the same cafe at 3 p.m. "I'll bring a witness and some confidential documents. Make sure nobody spots you there." She hung up, her heart racing. Always alert, she slipped into her bedroom and changed into something more inconspicuous: a black turtleneck, dark jeans, a thin scarf to hide her neck, and a crossbody bag. Ankle-height leather boots made for quiet steps on the pavement. Before leaving, she paused before a photograph of her parents on the bookshelf, her mother's kindly face tinged with sorrow. Clutching the photo, she reminded herself, no hesitation. At 3 o'clock, the cafe retained its old-world charm, redolent of roasted coffee and fresh pastries. Elara sat in a secluded corner, her hands wrapped around a warm latte, eyes fixed on the door. Soon Dorian appeared, flanked by a tall woman with a neat blonde bob. She inclined her head in greeting. "Hello, I'm Cassandra Vale, an art copyright attorney working with Dorian." Elara nodded, curiosity flickering in her gaze. "Pleasure to meet you. Dorian mentioned a new lead?" Cassandra set 2 files on the table and opened them to marked pages. "We obtained internal Artiscorp emails sent to Viennese exhibition curators. They mention painting styles akin to Marianne's work, with instructions to neutralize her reputation before the public could learn the truth." She sighed. "They orchestrated the plagiarism rumors and paid certain critics to pen scathing reviews." Elara remained silent, a vein pulsing at her temple. "So who's behind it?" she whispered. Dorian folded a page and met her eyes. "Victor Hoffer, Artiscorp's Director of Art Operations, promoted to Vice President 3 months ago." Cassandra added, we have financial records showing transfers to critics and funding for defamatory articles. We need proof he directly coerced Marianne." Elara nodded, a faint smile of resolve on her lips. "I need the names of those critics with conflicts of interest. If we interview them, we can expose their false statements." Cassandra handed her a list of names and contacts. "Dorian leaves for Munich next week, I'll email them." After they departed, Elara remained, sipping her latte as its bitterness lingered. She glanced at the bustling street outside. No one suspected the explosive evidence in her hands. She thought of her mother, of their shared creative days, and how swiftly Marianne's career had been buried in disgrace. Inhaling deeply, she thought, "I will not let you lie alone in that grave." Back at her penthouse, she opened her laptop and drafted emails to the critics, signing as an independent researcher verifying art historical records. Each message was a cautious step that might open doors or plunge her deeper into danger. She sent them, muted her device, and stepped to the window. The distant waves murmured, "Justice exists, but not for the faint of heart." She returned to the studio, switched on the soft lamp, and rested her hand on a blank canvas. Tomorrow Dorian would depart. She had to finish 2 final paintings to join the charity auction in Vienna, a key opportunity to approach Artiscorp's leadership. Everything was meticulously planned. A surge of purpose filled her. "Mother, I'm ever closer to the truth," she whispered. Her brush touched the canvas, tracing the final curves of Marianne's portrait, laying the groundwork for the next chapter of her quest. That evening, the amber street lamps of Barcelona couldn't warm the chill in her heart. Elara stepped onto the balcony, merging with the stillness, the Mediterranean breeze lifting her dark hair. She looked to the horizon, where thinning clouds gave way to moonlight. In that moment, her mother's memory came alive, Marianne standing before a portrait of an unknown artist, her eyes alight with defiance against the slander surrounding her. Elara wondered if her mother ever felt such loneliness. The next morning, she awoke later than usual. The alarm urged her back to work. In the studio, dawn light revealed fresh paint on her final canvas, Prague's old town in mist, people drifting beside the Vltava river, lamplight dancing on the water. This painting proved Nox Aurora's skill, and hid a secret cipher, a small silhouette of her mother woven into the townscape, a tribute and plea for justice. Her hand trembled as she dipped the brush into ivory white. Each stroke stirred its own ache, yet drove her onward. Her mind raced with plans: follow up with Viennese critics, file charges against Victor Hofer, prepare for an exclusive interview. Though the road ahead was perilous, Elara would not waver. "I cannot fail. Mother sacrificed too much," she vowed. Lost in her work, her phone buzzed with a message from Dorian: "I leave Munich tomorrow night. Lodging and schedule arranged. Be wary of Vivian and Harlow, they may still interfere." Elara read it, feeling the weight of his trust. She knew those 2 women loomed: Vivian, poised to defend her family's honor, Harlow, eager to betray Elara for favor. She replied softly, "Thank you. I will be careful." That afternoon, an art critic replied, requesting a meeting to discuss Marianne Silvers' historical records. Elara arranged to meet at a quiet tea house in Izampel. Before leaving, she retrieved her mother's original draft sketch, unpublished and irresistible evidence, and packaged it carefully. She locked her door and went out. The tea house, nestled among old buildings, featured dark wood, purple velvet drapes, and handcrafted signs. Elara waited at the back table, eyes on the entrance. 10 minutes later, a middle-aged man in a navy suit approached, his gaunt face betraying long hours of writing. After polite introductions, Elara began, "I understand you attended Marianne's exhibition 5 years ago. I'd like your first-hand impressions." The man stared at the sketch, his fingers trembling on its edge. He paused, voice thick with remorse. "I recall her precision, no one could mimic it. But once Artiscorp's directive arrived, I had to write that negative review. They threatened to shut down our magazine if I refused." He looked up, guilt in his eyes. Please forgive me. Elara nodded, her heart aching. She recorded his testimony, every tear a crucial piece of evidence. Returning to her studio, Elara felt elation at the new lead and bitterness at witnessing what artists endured for comfort. How many others had suffered in silence? The cruelty of power had dragged not only her mother but honest artists into the mud. She inhaled the pungent scent of oil paint and vowed, "Justice is not only my mother's light, but the voice for those who cannot speak." That night, her phone rang unexpectedly, Vivian calling. Her calm yet warning tone sent a chill through Elara. "I know everything, Nox Aurora. If you dare target Artist Corp or harm my husband's reputation, I will expose your anonymity and the rumors of your affair with Dorian." Elara listened in stunned silence, her usual composure swept away by righteous anger. "Vivian, please don't threaten me. I only seek the truth," she replied. The line went dead, leaving a tense hush around her. She rose and walked to the wall of finished paintings. Moonlight revealed every intricate stroke. Gently brushing her fingers over the canvases, she thought, "This battle is not just for my mother, but for every artist trampled by injustice." She returned to her desk and drafted an essay titled Reflections on Art and Power under Nox Aurora, set to publish anonymously on a respected art blog. Her final line read, "I will not stop until justice is served." At midnight, Elara gazed at Marianne's portrait on the wall. Her mother's eyes, lit by moonlight, bore endless longing. Elara whispered softly, "Mother, I have begun the journey. Guide me so that justice is more than a dream." She switched off the lights and lay down, her mind ablaze and ready for tomorrow, the first of many trials on her path to reclaim honor and truth. The early morning fog in Munich clung to the ancient rooftops, lending the city an unusually hushed atmosphere. Dorian Black walked from his hotel toward the sleek glass headquarters of Artist Corp, his brow furrowing as he glimpsed the giant tower looming through the mist. In his satchel he carried thick dossiers of evidence, internal emails, money transfer contracts, and surreptitious photographs taken inside the director's office. Each step on the damp pavement echoed like a reminder that he was about to enter the stronghold of Europe's most formidable power. Meanwhile in Barcelona, Elara spent her morning polishing the essay Reflections on Art and Power before sending it to a trusted editor. She reread every line, wondering if her anonymous words would spark the resistance she hoped to inspire among fellow artists. Outside, the rumble of buses and the cries of candy floss vendors startled her. Life carried on unchanged, despite the dark conspiracies unfolding far away. Her feelings for Dorian had warmed steadily in recent days, yet she refused to let herself be distracted. Her sole focus remained justice for her mother. Back in Munich, Dorian passed through the pristine security checkpoint, his badge emitting a blue scanlight as he entered. He rode the elevator up to the executive floor, 12, and felt his pulse quicken as the doors slid open onto a lavish red-carpeted corridor, flanked by grand oil paintings. He allowed himself a faint smile, perhaps Nox Aurora's work, but cautioned himself, "Stay calm. Stay on task." At the door to Victor Hoffer's office, Dorian knocked and heard the director's cool, confident voice. He stepped inside. Victor stood behind a massive oak desk, sharp-eyed, flanked by two black-suited assistants clutching iPads. Victor offered a polite smile. "Mr. Black, good to meet you in person." "Sir," Dorian replied, "I have questions about some internal emails." Victor nodded, lips tightening. "All relevant documents have been cleared by compliance. Please, help yourself." He motioned, and an assistant presented a leather tray stamped confidential. Dorian opened it to find Elara Silvers' name in a May 2019 review report. "I'd like to know who instructed the spread of those plagiarism rumors," he asked. Victor raised an eyebrow. "We only oversee art evaluations. Public gossip is another matter." His tone was measured, but a flicker of unease passed through his eyes. Before Dorian could press further, an urgent notice arrived, an impromptu executive meeting. Victor rose gracefully. I'm afraid we must postpone. Mr. Black, please return Friday. Dorian's dissatisfaction showed. My flight was arranged solely for this evidence. Every day's delay risks losing leads. Victor stood firm. You may wait or depart. But you may not disseminate internal information. Dorian stepped back, voice low. I will consider it. He set down the tray and turned to leave. The door closed behind him, leaving Victor in silence. Outside, Dorian called Elara, urgency in his voice. Our plan's been thwarted. We need a new move. Are you ready to publish Marianne's original sketch on the blog before Friday? On her laptop in Barcelona, Elara nodded. I'll post it tonight. I'll send you the link. Later, Elara sat before her screen and clicked publish. Marianne's delicate original sketch appeared, fine, graceful lines accompanied by her handwritten note on inspiration from the 2018 art crisis. A short caption read, "This is authenticity, it cannot be copied." Immediately social media erupted, hundreds of shares and heated debates. Experts recognized the unmistakable style as uniquely Marianne's. Elara exhaled, knowing this was just the first step. When Dorian flew back to Barcelona to join her monitoring the fallout, they sat facing one another in her dimly lit apartment. Notifications chimed non-stop, and tweets tagged #JusticeForMarianne surged across the web. Elara allowed herself a genuine smile for the first time in days, her eyes reflecting renewed hope. This was more than a temporary victory, it proved the power of truth and the bond formed between two hearts in a shared struggle. Before dawn had fully broken over Venice, Elara had already slipped from her hotel to walk along the winding canals. A pale haze cloaked the city, touched only by the faint rose glow of the rising sun. She wore a dark trench coat and carried a slim portfolio of documents, her footsteps slow across the Rialto Bridge. A flutter of emotion stirred within her. For the first time since embarking on her quest, she and Dorian had been invited to an awards ceremony honoring anonymous artists, hosted by the European Art Council. It was her golden opportunity to reveal herself in public, and to challenge Artist Corp in front of the press. Dorian met her at the grand Baroque entrance hall, its soaring, ornate arches and sparkling crystal chandeliers reflecting off marble statues. He regarded her from head to toe, admiration and concern mingling in his eyes. You know this could fully expose you, he said. Elara nodded, lips pressed in determination. Her gaze was icy but resolute. If not now, then when? My mother deserves recognition, and I will not back down. Inside, they passed rows of VIPs as museum directors, collectors, renowned critics, all eyes drawn to Elara, though few realized that Nox Aurora sat among them in the flesh. Soft music filled the room as the MC spoke of the silent contributions of behind-the-scenes artists. When the segment for Nox Aurora arrived, a spotlight snapped onto her. Her heart hammered, but she rose and walked steadily down the red carpet toward the stage. The MC handed her a silver plaque engraved with a rising moon emblem, the symbol of Nox Aurora. Thunderous applause erupted. Beyond the accolades, Elara sensed a ripple of curiosity. Everyone wondered who the real artist was. She inclined her head in thanks, offering only a faint, enigmatic smile. Dorian squeezed her shoulder, then discreetly slipped a small USB drive into her hand. Elara understood immediately. It contained all the video evidence Dorian had gathered in Munich, recordings of Victor Hofer plotting Marianne's downfall. After the ceremony, in a secluded VIP lounge, Elara plugged the drive into her laptop. On screen appeared Victor's impassive face and his own voice, crystal clear, ensure she never even gets close to awards. Label her a plagiarist, then manipulate the media until the public turns away. His words rang like a verdict. Tears welled in Elara's eyes. We have him, she whispered. What now? Dorian held her hand firmly. We release it now, through independent media. Reporters are waiting outside. They opened their laptops and, through the conference's internal network, quietly distributed the video. Within moments, footage and quotes from Victor spread across international art news sites. Whispers in the hall swelled into gasps of outrage as attendees learned Artiscorp's role. In that instant, Elara felt a final tear escape, grief entwined with triumph. Her mother's justice was at last within reach, though the road ahead would be even more treacherous. As the crowd poured into the streets seeking answers, Elara and Dorian slipped out a back door, winding through the narrow Venetian alleys. Late afternoon sun slanted across the paving stones, catching flecks of water from the canals. Elara inhaled deeply, tasting Venice's unique blend of brine and lilac from balcony blooms. Eyes closed, she whispered to her mother, "Mother, I have taken the most important step." At that moment her phone buzzed with an urgent message from her management. "News has spread. Artiscorp plans to retaliate, charging you with breaching your anonymity contract and misusing confidential materials." Elara's gaze hardened. "They will exploit every loophole." Dorian put a calming hand on her shoulder. "We anticipated this. I'll prepare our counterclaim dossier and coordinate with Cassandra's legal team. You focus on protecting your identity and well-being." The anonymous artist's once rock-solid cloak was fraying. Terror, like ice, crept through Elara's chest. If her true identity were exposed, she risked not only her career but her freedom. She looked at Dorian, tears glinting in her eyes. "I'm afraid," she admitted, words she had never spoken before, now a cry in the darkness. Dorian squeezed her hand. "I know. But you are not alone. I'm here, and we will face this together." As dusk fell over Venice, the two stood at the crossroads of destiny. Behind them lay Marianne's painful legacy, ahead loomed Artiscorp's ruthless counterstrike. Elara took a steadying breath and lifted her chin to catch the last rays of daylight. She vowed that, no matter how perilous the journey, she would wield truth and talent as her weapons against power. And in her heart, her mother's spirit remained an undying light, guiding every step she took. The next morning, the jarring shrill of her phone shattered the penthouse's silence. Elara frowned at the screen. It was Cassandra's direct line. She took a deep breath and picked up. The lawyer's urgent voice crackled through. "Elara, the Vienna court has just issued an emergency injunction ordering us to halt all publication of materials related to Artiscorp until the preliminary hearing. They're accusing you of breaching your anonymity agreement and misappropriating confidential documents." Elara closed her eyes, feeling her heart tighten. Victor Hoffer, the man who'd struck each legal blow, was now moving to eliminate her like a disposable pawn. She set the phone down and crossed into the living room. Golden sunlight filtered through the curtains but did nothing to lift the oppressive atmosphere. Dorian was already there, his face grave. He took her hand, worry in his gaze. "I've just heard. They're fast-tracking the indictment. You'll need to be in Vienna to testify next week." Elara nodded silently, chastising herself for having rushed to release the evidence. She knew now that the path to her mother's justice had grown more treacherous than ever. At midday, under the blazing sun, Elara and Dorian arrived at Cassandra's law office in central Barcelona. The spacious room, paneled in dark wood, featured a long conference table set with case files, a projector, and red-lined court orders, Vienna's stay of publication decree. The three of them gathered around the table as Cassandra explained, "We'll appeal on grounds of free speech and the right to safeguard artistic reputation. I need you to prepare a detailed statement, along with a power of attorney from the Silvers family to prove your ownership of the work." Elara nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, every next move tied to her mother's past and to her own. That afternoon, Elara spent an hour debriefing Dorian. She recounted how her mother had entrusted all original drafts to a close friend in Vienna, ensuring that if anything went wrong, someone would safeguard the evidence, hence Vienna's role as custodian of witnesses and documents. Yet she worried, would Artiscorp find a way to destroy those manuscripts? Dorian reassured her, I've instructed our Vienna council to secure the originals and protect the witnesses at all costs. They fully grasped the case's importance. Still, in his eyes, Elara saw a flicker of uncertainty, his first admission of anxiety. After meeting with Cassandra, Elara returned to her studio. Surrounded by half-finished canvases, she sat unmoving, unable to make another stroke. In her mind echoed her mother's whisper, "You must stand firm before the storm." She closed her eyes and let memories flood back, Marianne's sad yet resolute face watching over her as a child. A quiet loneliness crept in, propelling Elara to rise and step onto the balcony for a breath of air. High above, rainbow-hued clouds drifted, but for Elara the sky had lost all color. Night fell, and Dorian appeared in the studio carrying a hot pizza box. He set it on her work table and offered her a warm smile. "You need to eat. Conserve your strength for the days ahead." Elara returned a weary smile, feeling a flicker of warmth. They sat opposite each other, tearing slices of gooey cheese pizza in silence. The only sound was soft music from a small speaker. Finally she asked, "If Artis Corp wins, what will become of me?" Dorian laid a hand on her shoulder. "They could seek financial damages, demand you surrender your works, even force you to reveal your identity. But I believe the evidence we've provided will convince the Vienna court to uphold your creative rights." His confident gaze banished her loneliness. A week later, they flew to Vienna. Drizzle coated the runway when the plane touched down. Elara pulled her damp scarf tighter as she stepped off the plane beside Dorian, the chill of late October in Northern Europe seeping through her sweater. The legal battle was about to begin, the preliminary hearing at the Vienna High Court, where Artis Corp had assembled a formidable legal team. She steeled herself for Marcus Leitner, the corporation's spokesman, who would argue she had violated her anonymity contract and exploited proprietary materials. The night before the hearing, sleep eluded Elara. She sat in the hotel's lounge, gazing out at Stephansplatz sparkling under street lamps, listening to distant church bells. Dorian knocked softly and entered with a cup of chamomile tea. He settled beside her, concern in his eyes. "Are you afraid?" he asked. She nodded. "I understand. But you aren't alone. I've held your hand every step of the way." His voice trembled ever so slightly. Elara had never seen this vulnerability in the usually unflappable detective. She placed her hand over his, drawing strength from his warmth. In that moment, she realized that amid every storm, someone was there to share her burden and protect her. The next morning, Elara donned a long coat and woolen cap and headed to court. Passing beneath the grand archway, she saw Marcus Leitner standing with Artis Corp's legal team. He frowned as their eyes met. "Surely you'll reconsider before the court, Nox Aurora," he taunted. Elara halted and met his gaze unflinchingly. "I trust in truth and art." "I am ready," she replied softly but firmly, silencing him with her resolve. The hearing began. Elara stepped onto the witness stand and inhaled deeply, letting her mother's pain and her own determination flow through her words. As she presented the evidence, her calm, articulate testimony resonated through the solemn chamber. Dorian watched from below, pride shining in his eyes. In the back of the room, Elara noticed Vivian and Harlow slipping in, ready to disrupt proceedings, but she refused to be shaken. She focused fully, each sentence clear: anonymity agreements cannot be exploited to suppress freedom of creation. "I ask the court to recognize." Judges took meticulous notes. Their attention fixed on Elara, drawn not only by her eloquence but by the genuine conviction behind each word. In that instant, past trauma and present struggle merged, the moment she stood up not only for her mother but for artistic freedom itself and for generations to come. And in her heart, hope burned brighter than ever. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as the presiding judge prepared to deliver the final word. Elara remained at the stand, arms gently folded, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She remembered why she was there, not for personal glory, but to reclaim justice for her mother, to clear the name of every gentle-spirited artist trampled by power. The judge's gaze swept over both counsels and settled on Elara's unwavering eyes. After a hushed pause, he rapped his gavel and announced an adjournment for deliberation. Whispers filled the corridor outside. Elara descended the marble steps, feeling the crisp northwestern European air seep through her coat. A fine drizzle dotted the cobblestones and clung to her hair. Dorian appeared at her side, holding a black umbrella, eyes full of pride. Gently, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did wonderfully. Now we wait for the final ruling." Elara nodded, though her chest still felt heavy. Her mother had not lived to witness this moment. She offered a silent prayer, "Mother, I'm repaying your sacrifice." That afternoon in the courtroom, the verdict came. Artiscorp not only lost the case but was ordered to pay damages for defamation and cover legal costs. The injunction lifted immediately. All evidence submitted by Elara and Dorian was made public. Waves of relief and jubilation swelled in her chest, applause rose from the gallery, journalists' faces reflected stunned respect, and more than anything, the triumph of truth over power echoed in her soul. Tears sprung unbidden as Elara felt as though invisible chains had been broken. Dorian slipped an arm around her, drawing her close to share this simple yet priceless joy. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the courthouse's oakwood scent to imprint the moment forever. "You did it," he whispered. Elara said nothing, simply clinging to him as years of loneliness melted away. Reporters swarmed the exit corridors, camera flashes strobing. Microphones thrust forward, but Elara offered only a brief, heartfelt smile and a single thank you to those who had acknowledged the truth. Dorian stayed close behind, shielding her like a guardian, hand firmly guiding her through the crowd. Together, they slipped away as the verdict's reverberations lingered in the air. Back at the hotel, Elara stood at the high-rise window, gazing out over Vienna's canal-lined streets, golden lights shimmering in the water. She remembered her mother's gentle smile when dressing her in new jackets, and the scent of herbs Marianne burned to mask paint fumes during her childhood. Now, though wounds should have healed, memories remained as vivid as ever. Placing a hand over her heart, she whispered, "Mother, I've brought you justice, but I have also paid too high a price." Dorian entered quietly, carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He handed one to her and ran a finger through her hair. "How shall we celebrate?" His gentle smile glistened with emotion. In that instant, Elara longed to flee, from the glare of adoring crowds, from these labyrinthine streets of intrigue, to live a peaceful, anonymous life. She sighed, eyes distant. "I only want a place where no one knows Nox Aurora, where I can create freely without fighting for anyone else." Dorian sat beside her, stroking the rim of his mug. He understood that her true aim had never been fame. He set his mug down and turned to her with earnest eyes. "I know you're exhausted. But you can't leave it all behind. You saved me once, after that accident long ago." Elara's eyes widened in shock. He had never spoken of that past memory, of a stormy night when young Elara slipped across a slick wooden plank to pull him from a collapsing doorway. "I remember the face behind the hood, even though you recovered," he continued. "In my heart, that warmth was you." Elara's throat tightened. She recalled that childhood moment, never imagining that her hidden act of rescue had saved a life. For years she'd masked her identity to avenge her mother, never allowing herself to be loved. Before Dorian, she always kept her guard up to avoid further pain. Now his words leveled every wall she'd built. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mingling sorrow with the joy bursting in her heart. She laid her hand over his. "I always thought I didn't deserve love. I wore the mask of Nox Aurora to hide my wounds and protect my mother's memory. But now, I want to stop. I want to be Elara Silvers, Marianne's daughter, a free artist, and someone who feels safe next to you." Her voice was barely a breath, yet Dorian felt the depth of her love. He smiled, drew her into his arms, and whispered, "I will stay by your side, always." That night, they sat before the portable easel Dorian had brought. On it lay the final painting Elara completed in Vienna, her mother standing amid a cloud of soft ash, her gaze fixed on a horizon of freedom. Together they added a few finishing strokes, not for display but as a ritual marking a new beginning. Elara's hand trembled with hope, Dorian's held steady, warm in support. The small room filled with the scent of paint and cocoa, two hearts beating as one, looking toward their future. As the candle's flame neared its end, Elara looked up at Dorian in the gentle golden light. She smiled softly, "This chapter may be closed, but our story is only beginning." He replied with a tender kiss on her forehead. In that moment, all bitterness and mistrust melted away, leaving only true love and the promise of freedom. And in the lavender bloom resting by the window, its fragrance affirmed that however dense the darkness, the light of truth and love could never be extinguished. Dawn on the Amalfi coast draped the sky in a soft rose hue, a scene as gentle as Elara's own spirit at that moment. She rose early, drew back the curtains, and gazed at the deep blue sea stretching to the endless horizon. The salty breeze drifted through the bedroom, caressing her face like a tender greeting. Slipping on a lightweight wool robe, she stepped out onto the small terrace furnished with wicker chairs. Before her lay sun-kissed cliffs dotted with pristine white houses clinging to rocky ledges. The breath of nature soothed her, no city noise or dust, no schemes for fame or threats of power, only quiet peace. Cradling a cup of richly aromatic coffee, Elara savored its gentle bitterness, like the embers of memory glowing within her. She reflected on the relentless struggle of recent months and on her mother's sacrifices to preserve her integrity as a true artist. Now that the evidence was public and Artiscorp had confessed fault, Elara understood that every effort had been worthwhile. Yet the memory of loneliness, of that once frozen mask, still stirred her heart. The door opened softly and Dorian entered, carrying 2 steaming espressos. He set one beside her and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. His smile held simple happiness. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. Elara turned in his arms and laid her hand on his shoulder, her gaze drifting to the sea. "You know," she said, "there's still so much I want to say." He kissed the crown of her head. "I'm always listening." After breakfast on the terrace, they planned their future. Dorian produced a copy of the sales contract for her Barcelona penthouse, the site of countless investigations and paintings. "If you want a fresh start," he offered softly, "we can sell this place and move here to Amalfi, build a small studio." Elara fell silent, imagining red-tiled rooftops and waves lapping as brushes met canvas. She smiled softly. "I want somewhere no one knows Nox Aurora's past. I want to just be Elara, a free artist without the burden of sleuthing." The next day they traveled to a tiny fishing village on Sardinia's coast. The winding road hugged cliffs, passing endless olive groves, wild meadows, and glittering golden sands. In the car, Elara leaned against the window, watching sunlight dance on the water. She confided her childhood dream to Dorian, to found an artist's haven where hidden talents could display their work and exchange freely, unpressured by markets. He nodded enthusiastically. "That's wonderful. I'll help you make it real." Upon arrival, they rented a small stilted oak-floored house facing the vast ocean. Around them bustled fishing boats, the clatter of decks, the scent of fresh catch blending with brine. At night they set up easels under the porch, lantern light flickering over 2 silhouettes. Elara uncapped a tube of paint, unveiled a blank canvas, and studied its fresh ocean base. With the first brushstroke, freedom pulsed through her fingertips. Dorian sat beside her, mixing paint on a palette. This was no longer an investigation but the true beginning of a creative journey, where love and art intertwined. But the next evening, just as they lost themselves in color, Elara's phone chimed with an urgent email from Art Review magazine. The subject line read, "Exclusive interview with Nox Aurora, unveiling the truth." Her heart clenched. Though she yearned to shed anonymity, this invitation to reveal her true self to the public arrived unexpectedly. Dorian patted her shoulder. "This could let you be yourself and honor your mother." We should consider it. She lay awake all night. She once feared fame's traps and vowed to hide in shadows forever. Now, on the threshold of another choice, she realized anonymity was avoidance, while disclosure was the courage to embrace both praise and criticism. At dawn she composed her reply. She would agree to the interview, but only at the little Sardinian village where they now lived. The interview took place by the harbor as morning light streamed through aged wooden beams. Facing the camera, Elara confronted something new, direct eye contact, her voice trembling with emotion. The reporter asked about her investigative journey and the love between her and Dorian. She recounted her mother's suffering, her own devotion, and her yearning for freedom. Her tone was steady yet laced with pride and tenderness. When asked if she regretted revealing herself, Elara smiled. No, nothing is more frightening than hiding in darkness forever. The article went live across art channels, the headline proclaiming, Elara Silvers, from anonymity to freedom. Online communities buzzed at the sight of her painting by the quay, wind-tossed hair aglow. They admired a woman who had once been wounded but chose to face the world head-on. In her tears they found inspiration. Art is not just a painting but a journey to oneself. And with that, Elara's new life truly began. She and Dorian launched the Village of Poetry and Painting in Sardinia, a sanctuary for artists from around the globe to gather, share works and stories, unbound by contracts or markets. At sunset, the studio glowed by the sea, canvases hung shoulder to shoulder, brushes whispering across cloth. Standing amidst it all, Elara felt the pulse of nature and the joy of community. On the first evening at the village, Elara and Dorian sat by the pier under a slender crescent moon reflecting on the water. She leaned on his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for guiding me through every storm." Dorian smiled and kissed her cheek. "Just promise you'll never lose your dream." They sat in silence, letting the sea breeze murmur promises of tomorrow. They had conquered the darkness of power, reclaimed her mother's justice, and above all, they found each other, free souls immersed in life's vibrant palette. Morning in Sardinia carried the sea's sweet breath and the scent of wild herbs. Elara awoke in the attic room with oak floors, the sound of waves drifting through the half-open window. She opened her eyes and sat slowly, welcoming the first rays of light across her hair. Memories of their arduous journey shimmered like distant ripples, now safely behind her. Beside her lay no burden of investigation or the Nox Aurora persona, only a simple dream, to grow the Village of Poetry and Painting into a haven for free-spirited artists. The loft held the first sketches by Elara and Dorian, roughed in seaside rooflines, a distant lighthouse, an abandoned castle swallowed by wildflowers. She let her fingers trail across the unpainted pages, recalling the exhaustion after leaving Vienna, then the wellspring of creativity that followed. A sense of freedom surged within her, tinged with anxiety. Could the village truly become a safe home for those she cherished? A gentle knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Dorian entered, carrying a pot of herbal tea and a tray of crisp biscotti. His warm gaze met hers. "Some morning sweetness," he offered. Elara smiled, feeling simple happiness bloom in her chest. They sat by the window overlooking the bay, nibbling honey sweetbread and sharing plans for the day. Dorian spoke of contacting local ceramic artisans eager to exhibit their work monthly. Elara's eyes glowed as she pictured a small gallery by the dock, where visitors could pause, admire, and speak directly with the creators. By midday, the village bells rang as Elara led Dorian on a survey of the coastline. Houses cascaded up the hillside, their aged stone walls brightened with fresh paint, forming a rustic panorama. She paused before a brick wall covered in bougainvillea blossoms, gently stroking its dried petals. She thought of her mother painting walls in Paris, inspiring passers-by. Elara wondered, could murals here tell the story of artistic freedom, untouched by fame or scandal? That afternoon they returned to the stilted house, where 7 artists, from Italy, France, Germany, had gathered. Fireflies flickered among the porch beams, and the scents of oil paint and fresh wood mingled warmly. Standing in the circle, Elara introduced each talent, An illustrator, a metal sculptor, a wood engraver, a chamber musician soon to perform. For a moment she paused, seeing hope in their eyes, the dream to create freely, unbound by market contracts. She felt the weight of her responsibility, to make the village both a creative incubator and a bastion of individual identity. When night fully fell, a banquet of bread, cheese, and Sardinian wine filled the garden table. Candles glowed beneath bougainvillea vines, and the sea breeze coaxed gentle laughter. Dorian drew a chair next to her and whispered, "I got a letter from Vivian." She apologized for the trouble she caused. "Maybe once everything's settled, we should let the past rest." Elara nodded and inhaled the faint lavender scent drifting across the table. "I'm ready to forgive, but never to forget the lesson of the past." Her voice was soft yet resolute. Later, after the artists drifted away to their lodgings, Elara carried a cup of chamomile tea down to the pier. The crescent moon shimmered on the water, the waves whispered like the heartbeat of the cosmos. She relaxed her shoulders, letting the sea breeze brush away the day's tension. Dorian joined her from behind, his arm encircling her waist. They stood silently, listening to night sounds, distant chatter, chirping insects, and her own heart stirring beside the sea. Yet tranquility would not last unchanged. The next morning, a letter from Art Review arrived at the village. "We'd like to host a global virtual exhibition dedicated to Elara Silvers. Please prepare your works." Excitement rippled through the artists, an opportunity to reach the world, yet one that would cast her identity back into the international spotlight. Elara held the letter, feeling its weight in her chest. She stepped into the studio and gazed at the 4 unfinished canvases, doubt rising. Was she truly ready to return to the stage? Had Nox Aurora been buried too deeply, or was it simply a mask awaiting unveiling? Dorian sat before her canvas, reading the letter before placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This could spread your message of creative freedom. Do you want to decline?" Elara closed her eyes and faced her own truth. She remembered arriving in Sardinia, anxious and uncertain, then feeling shy pride joining the artist community. Now she knew, freedom was not only hiding but daring to emerge, to share her story. She nodded firmly. "I will participate. But on one condition, it's a single virtual show, with no further obligations." That decision marked a new turning point for the village. In the following days, Elara worked tirelessly on her final piece, a large lacquer painting depicting her mother drifting in a white dress amid a lavender field. Each lacquer layer required days to cure, like the lingering tensions in her heart needing time to settle. Dorian sat nearby, ready with a small bowl of water for her brushes. He watched every graceful movement, his eyes full of love and faith. On the eve of the virtual exhibition, Elara stood in the cottage lit by small lamps, staring at the pre-programmed projection screen. The entire village of poetry and painting had gathered. The sea breeze slipped through the open door, soothing her spirit. Dorian handed her a VR headset. "When you put this on," he whispered, "you won't feel alone. I'm here, and the world, even virtually, will know your story." Elara inhaled deeply and donned the headset. A 3D space unfolded before her, the cobblestone path, the fishing quay, the riot of mural colors. The title Elara Silvers, Freedom in Every Stroke, appeared in the vaulted sky. In that moment, her heart soared over the boundless sea. All fears of the past and doubts about fame dissolved under the vast view. She smiled through a solitary tear, then gently applied the final brushstroke to her lacquer painting, a whispered promise to her mother, "I have found freedom, and I will never turn away." In both virtual and real worlds, Elara Silvers, the once anonymous artist, had truly returned to herself, stepping forward with Dorian on the unending path of art and love. Morning in Sardinia broke more brilliantly than usual, as though heralding a truly fresh beginning. Elara sat quietly by the studio window, sunlight streaming through the crystal panes and scattering glittering flecks across her lacquer painting. She gently dipped her brush into ivory white and began tracing the final outlines on her portrait of her mother standing in a lavender field. Her heart raced, Today she would not only unveil her work on the global virtual platform but also step fully out of the Nox Aurora shell and claim her own life. As each layer of paint dried to a glossy sheen, Dorian slipped into the studio carrying a small frame containing the only sketch Marianne had given her daughter on the day of her graduation 10 years earlier. He placed the frame in the sun, his eyes following the glint of fresh paint with admiration for the once anonymous artist now on the cusp of fame. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Elara looked up, her deep eyes alight with both confidence and nerves. "Everything's prepared. But I don't know if I have the courage to reveal it all." Dorian clasped her hand firmly. "I believe in you, both as an artist and as Marianne's daughter, and in the person you want to become." The little fishing village was no longer as tranquil as it had been last week. Word of the virtual exhibition had drawn scores of international artists, and Elara's studio buzzed with activity, brushes stroking canvases, footsteps down oak hallways, murmured discussions of event logistics, a vibrant energy she moved through, greeting collaborators and fellow makers. Along the corridor, lacquer paintings, ceramic pieces, metal sculptures, and even rough musical scores bore her stamp as connector and inspirer. She caught herself smiling. She had truly overcome her early loneliness. At midday, she and Dorian reviewed the online platform with the technical team. The giant virtual dock screen was primed to showcase her mystical lacquer technique under simulated sunlight. Dorian gave her a gentle squeeze. 30 minutes to go. Elara drew a slow breath, her hands trembling. She closed her eyes, counted silently 1, 2, 3, then opened them and walked onto the temporary wooden stage. Behind her lay the limitless blue sea, ahead dozens of camera lenses and hundreds of online viewers. Her voice rang out over the microphone. "Hello everyone, I'm Elara Silvers. You may have known me as Nox Aurora. Today, I want to share my story of a mother's love, the right to creative freedom, and a dream to build a space where art is unbound." She recounted her journey from Venice to Vienna, endless days poring over documents, sleepless nights in the courthouse, and the ache of knowing her mother would never see the outcome. Each phrase was resolute, her voice wavering only when she spoke of the last moment she saw Marianne alive. As she finished, the large screen behind her displayed her grand lacquer painting, Marianne in a white dress, arms outstretched in a sea of purple lavender. The image glowed with yearning for freedom and the weight of sacrifice. The virtual auditorium fell silent, save for the gentle sounds of simulated waves and the beating hearts of thousands of listeners. One viewer commented, "I've never seen a painting so beautiful and so heartrending." Another wrote, "Thank you for bringing hope to silent artists everywhere." A surge of virtual applause swept through the chat, lifting Elara with exhilaration. She bowed to her audience, then placed a hand over her heart. When the broadcast ended, she removed her mic as tears quietly slipped down her cheeks. Inbox notifications flooded into congratulations, interview requests, gallery invitations, book proposals. She glanced back at Dorian waiting behind the scenes, their eyes met in joyful disbelief. That night, the studio was lit by dozens of hanging lanterns, their warm glow playing across paintings and sculptures. Elara and Dorian carried a low table onto the porch and set down cups of chamomile tea. She opened her laptop and replayed the exhibition clip, watching herself stand confidently before the digital sea of faces. "I can't believe I actually did it," she whispered. Dorian smiled and kissed her cheek. "I always knew you would. Now comes the work of building the village, guiding others. This is just the beginning." From the days when she walked alone in silence to now helming an international network of artists, the village of poetry and painting had blossomed with hundreds of collaborative projects. Elara realized her calling had shifted. She would be the builder, the connector, more than the lone painter. She resolved to establish an artist support fund, host lacquer technique workshops, and organize regular idea exchange salons, each plan carefully noted and discussed with Dorian and the technical team. The next day they held their first local meet and greet, a woodcut illustrator, a sculptor working in recycled metal, and a roaming poet. The waterfront gallery area brimmed with introductions, applause, and eager eyes. Elara's heart swelled. She, once crushed by the pressures of art, was now creating a space where others could chase their passions unafraid. Before the small celebratory feast, Elara raised a glass of Sardinian wine to Dorian and their friends. "Thank you for always standing by me," she toasted. "And thank you all for believing in this dream." Cheers rang out and everyone's eyes turned to her in admiration. Elara smiled, freedom and joy flooding her. Late that night, she walked alone down to the pier. The sea breeze was brisk yet pure, and the stars spangled the sky overhead. Seated on the wooden dock, she opened the small framed sketch of her mother and gazed into Marianne's gentle eyes in charcoal. "Mother," she whispered, "I have kept my promise. I am free, and I am helping others find freedom too." Tears fell, not of sorrow but of complete fulfillment. At last, Elara understood, the journey never truly ends. Freedom, justice, and art demand persistence and courage. She rose, carried the sketch into the little room, and placed it beside her grand lacquer painting. Moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating both works in a silent dialogue between past and present. With a soft smile, she vowed aloud, "This chapter may close, but the village will continue to grow, and our story will be written anew each day." Beneath the starry night, Elara Silvers was no longer an anonymous shadow. She had become an inspiration and a guide for all kindred souls yearning to create, and living proof that, with faith and love, anyone can paint their own future. The teapot had long since emptied, yet Elara remained seated, quietly watching the moonlit waves of the night sea. A gentle breeze stirred the fronds of the palms by the porch, beckoning her back to reality, the world where the village of poetry and painting grew stronger with every artist's step. She rose, stretched her shoulders, and let the promise of a new dawn fill her lungs. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, Elara was back in her studio, hands streaked with paint but heart brimming with energy. She placed a small board on her work table listing next week's agenda: Scout second location, 4 colors of the Night Sea project, contact artbook editor, advanced lacquer painting workshop. Each item formed a bridge linking her to the wider community, from Sardinia to every corner of the country. She smiled softly as Dorian entered, carrying a box of local pastries. "I know you always prefer a simple breakfast," he teased. Less than an hour later, the team gathered around a regional map, marking the tiny fishing villages they would bring the village model to next. Lively discussion filled the room with a sense of urgent excitement. Elara shared her vision: each site should be more than a gallery. It would be a living archive where artists could preserve their images, stories, and creative processes. Dorian jotted down every idea, glancing at her with pride. "You're creating something magical," he said. At midday, Elara stole a few moments of quiet on the village quay beside a moored fishing boat. Eyes closed, she listened to the gentle lap of waves and the distant calls of seagulls, as if their song painted the canvas of her soul with freedom, tranquility, and passion. Memories of her mother Marianne flowed on the breeze, a reminder that every distant path remained lit by love and justice. She smiled and whispered, "Mother, I walk on with your faith guiding me." That afternoon, sunlight slanted across the bougainvillea as Elara led her first workshop. Children, elders, locals, and visiting artists all watched in rapt attention as she demonstrated basic lacquer techniques. Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as faces lit up at the sheen and precision of each brushstroke. She guided every step, weaving in stories of her legal journey and the power of truth. When the session ended, soft applause rippled around the room, and Elara knew she had ignited a spark of passion. As evening fell, Dorian and a small group of artists set out on a fishing skiff. The sea slapped gently against the hull, and the sunset painted the water gold. Surrounded by friends, Elara hoisted the white sail and felt salt on her skin. She thought of the future. The village would expand beyond Sardinia, dotting the Mediterranean and then crossing oceans to new lands. Once an anonymous soul, she had become a guide for hundreds of artists. Laughing, she let the wind carry her exclamation, "We've made it." When the sun dipped below the horizon, Elara returned to the village to find a saffron seafood stew simmering by the hearth. Laughter echoed across the wooden porch, the spicy aroma and the sea's freshness intoxicated her. Dorian pulled her into his arms beside the fire. "You deserve all this joy," he said. Elara nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, for being my true family." Wind chimes tinkled in the night. Elara rose once more and walked to the quay. She cupped her hand under a splash of warm seawater, then lifted her gaze to the stars. A flood of emotion coursed through her. The journey to reclaim her mother's justice was complete, but the quest to build the future stretched on. She vowed to herself, and to Marianne's spirit, to keep crafting spaces for artistic freedom, to honor love and truth in every stroke. In that moment, beneath the starlight and the sea breeze, Elara Silvers, no longer Nox Aurora, turned the page to a new chapter, not just as a painter, but as an endless source of inspiration for the world. The final dawn in Sardinia rang with the soft applause of waves bidding farewell. Elara woke before sunrise and stepped onto the second-story balcony, greeted only by the gentle sea and the cries of seabirds. She dipped her bare feet into the pebbled veranda, the early spring chill jolting her senses awake. In that moment, she felt wholly at home, a living piece of the vibrant canvas called the village of poetry and painting. Dorian appeared behind her, holding out a wide map. His eyes shone with excitement. "Today we survey Porto Rotondo harbor, preparing for next month's expansion." Elara smiled and traced her finger over the map, marking the old fish market, the stone-paved road to the central square, and the disused warehouse that could become a pop-up gallery. She caught the small creases beside his eyes when he smiled, souvenirs of all-nighters they'd shared. Softly, she asked, "Should I bring along my mother's old sketch as a symbol of new beginnings?" He nodded. "It will be the soul of every space you open." The coach wound its way down the mountainside to Porto Rotondo, golden sunlight pouring over red-tiled roofs and sparkling coves. Stepping off, Elara inhaled deeply. The air here felt both untouched and subtly elegant, salt mingling with the scent of warm sand. Hand in hand, she and Dorian walked the quay where wooden boats lay moored, the harbor hushed yet brimming with potential. In her mind, she whispered, "Every fishing village has its story, and I want to tell my mother's, of resilience and the thirst for freedom." At noon they met Captain Marco, a weathered old sailor who had sold them the disused dock. He led them into the sunlit, time-worn warehouse, sea breezes drifting through its decaying shutters. Elara set her mother's sketch on a wooden shelf, eyes resting on the rough portrait. "Captain," she said softly, "I'd like to turn this place into a floating gallery, where people can view art and then sail out to greet the waves." He laughed a deep, rumbling laugh. "You have a true artist's soul. Let's make that dream real." That afternoon, under a rose-hued sunset, Elara, Dorian, and the crew raised wooden frames, installed gallery lights, and painted the warehouse walls in pastel hues. Sweat mixed with sand on her skin, but her heart soared with joy. Each gust from the sea felt like nature's own applause, celebrating her inspired steps. She pulled Dorian to stand in the half-finished space, closed her eyes, and inhaled the scent of fresh timber. "See," she said. "Even at the world's edge, we can create art." When night fell, they lit candles throughout the warehouse, draping lacquer paintings, woodcuts, and her mother's sketch in warm light. Elara stood in the center, wearing a flowing white linen dress, her hair loose in the breeze. She felt her heartbeat chanting freedom, proof that she had realized her dream of a lasting artistic sanctuary. On opening night, the Fortress of Colors Gallery welcomed locals, travelers, and artists from near and far. As Elara stepped onto the central platform, gallery lights danced on her face. She smiled and said, "Thank you all for coming. This space is more than a gallery, it honors my mother's story, teaching me that art and justice must go hand in hand. I dedicate this place to sea, land, and community." Applause thundered, and even the offshore breeze seemed to join in the celebration. As visitors wandered the space, Elara listened to their reactions, tears at her mother's sketch, wonder at the lacquer's glow, and heartfelt messages left in the guestbook. She stood still and felt the invisible bond weaving people, art, and memory together. Late that night, Elara and Dorian sat aboard an anchored skiff offshore, waves lapping gently against the hull. Today's triumph gleamed like a gem, proof that the village of poetry and painting had taken root in Puerto Redondo and would carry its momentum forward. Elara leaned her head on Dorian's shoulder. "We did it," she whispered. "My mother would be smiling up there." He kissed her hair and murmured, "Her story, and yours, will be known for years to come." She closed her eyes, letting the sea breeze, salt-laced and hopeful, kiss her face. Each new day, each new village would open a chapter, each painting tell another tale. The journey to reclaim freedom and justice may have closed, but the voyage of spreading art was only beginning. And through every storm, Elara Silvers and Dorian Black would keep their torch burning bright, guiding all kindred spirits toward freedom in every stroke and every breath. The morning she departed Sardinia dawned with golden beams filtering through the wooden shutters of the stilted house, painting shimmering streaks on the floorboards. Elara woke beneath her simple linen blanket, her heart still echoing last night's gallery opening. The sea breeze drifted in through the slightly open door, mingling with the scent of dried herbs perched on her desk. She drew a deep breath, savoring the peace she had long only dreamed of. A gentle knock announced Dorian's arrival. He entered holding 2 cups of rich espresso and set one beside the bed before taking a seat, watching her curl up and reach for her cup. In the quiet that followed, just their breaths and the distant rolling of waves, he finally spoke, "You have new plans today." Elara smiled. "Do tell." He produced a small map of Europe and spread it across her lap. An independent museum collective in Lisbon has invited you to present the colors of the Night Sea Community Project and discuss replicating our model in Portugal. Elara's eyes lit with excitement. "Really? So the village of poetry and painting will soon span Spain, Portugal, and beyond?" Together they reviewed the marked locations, sketching out an itinerary, budgeting, and listing local artists to contact. Dorian suggested, "We should invite the French painter we worked with before and a group of island musicians for a night sea music series." Elara nodded, visions of moonlit music mingling with waves filling her mind. In her heart, freedom no longer lay in anonymity but in spreading inspiration far and wide. At midday they left the fishing village for inland Sardinia, where a leveled plot near the dunes awaited their second headquarters. Construction crews hummed with activity, bulldozers and chatter carving out a new outdoor stage. Elara watched the workers with pride, thinking, "We've reached one dream, now we make it real." That afternoon they returned to their moored skiff, refashioned as a mobile office. Dorian opened his laptop, hooked to satellite internet, and checked emails from partners across Europe. Elara sat beside him, listening to each ping, a fresh invitation, a proposal, a word of thanks, and even a message from an arts education nonprofit in Vietnam interested in their model. She rubbed her eyes, pride rising. "With every step, our village grows wings," she whispered. As the sunset painted the sky, they climbed the spiral staircase of an abandoned lighthouse perched on white sands. Elara carried her mother's original sketch in the frame that had accompanied her every journey. At the top, the endless sea lay before them, foam-white waves rolling beneath the dying light. Elara placed the sketch on the iron railing, letting the breeze caress the faint pencil lines, a silent tribute to Marianne. She closed her eyes, her heart full of love. "Mother, I have followed your path and will continue on it. I am not alone." Below the lighthouse, Dorian rested a hand on her shoulder. "Do you realize how you've changed so many people's worldviews?" he murmured. Elara turned to him, her eyes shining. "Only art and love can truly change hearts." He smiled and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. That night, as the lighthouse beacon twinkled like a man-made star, Elara and Dorian sat on the skiff's deck, listening to a local composer's sea wind symphony, mandolin chords and haunting vocals carried by the breeze. Elara closed her eyes, letting the lyrics wash over her. In the storm we find each other / amid the vastness, love our anchor / life's colors blaze brighter still / when art finds its voice. In that moment she understood that her quest for her mother's justice had merely begun the journey. This voyage held no final destination but an ongoing devotion to painting freedom into every life it touched. Opening her eyes, she looked at Dorian. "My love, we have an entire lifetime of canvases ahead." He squeezed her hand and whispered, "Together, we will reach every horizon." Under the star-spangled sea sky, waves lapped in steady rhythm, affirming that art breaks every chain, love heals every wound, and freedom burns forever in every heart. Elara Silvers, once the silent anonymous artist, now spread her wings wide, closing one long chapter of her life while opening countless new doors. And with every step she carried her mother's love, her own passion, and an undying thirst for freedom.